The haunted house that I grew up in is absolutely so fucked up. They would make a horror movie out of it, literally. It is something that's almost hard to believe. And today what I want to talk about isn't necessarily a paranormal phenomenon, or is it? I don't really know. When I was little, I used to think that I could fly when I would dream. And I know that sounds really weird, but I thought this for years, okay? I would go to bed after we moved into this house. I never did it prior. We moved into this house, I would go to sleep. And when I went to bed, I would literally see myself sleeping and I was having fun and I would like float through the house. But what was weird is I would like see what was going on in the house. I would see what other people were actively doing. I remember one time even being like, okay, I gotta go back. Like mom's gonna be mad if I'm flying. Like I remember actively thinking that. And there was multiple times when this would happen in my childhood where what was bizarre is like, I was actually seeing what really was going on. Like I would see my mom cleaning up like in the kitchen and come to find out like she was actually doing that. It was very bizarre. Now, I didn't know anything about astral projecting until a few years ago. I saw somebody make a video on it and I'm like, that's what I was doing. That is what I was doing. It's essentially like when you're asleep, your soul like leaves its body and like can travel on yonder. I found this out, I was scared as shit because I'm looking at these people's stories and they're dark. They're dark. I didn't experience anything dark when this was happening to me as a child. Honestly, it was fun. When I learned that that was what I was doing, it spooked the shit out of me. I haven't astral projected like that in many years. I think part of that might be because I do not sleep on my back anymore. After I learned that my sleep paralysis is always triggered when I lay on my back. I'm a stomach sleeper or a side sleeper. It's just something I notice. Sleep paralysis, which that is terrifying to me. I've had very scary things happen when I go into sleep paralysis. Always happens when I'm on my back. And looking back, when I would astral project, it was the same thing. But that hasn't happened in so many years. But my question for you guys is, what do you actually think astral projection is? Do you think that I started doing it because of the house? Because I had not done it until we moved into the house that is extremely haunted. And do you think there's a correlation between that and my sleep paralysis? Because in a lot of the scary stories you guys are sending me with your experiences, it's very interesting how many people that live in a very haunted space either have sleep paralysis or they astral project. Like, is it connected to the paranormal phenomenon? I don't really know. I want to know your guys' thoughts. The haunted house I grew up in is so fucked up, and this is my page where I initially started off talking about my experiences, which turned into now I'm telling your guys' story. And if you guys want a good night's sleep, scroll past this video or save it to listen to later, because the email submission I got, this had the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Hi Casey, my name is Emily, and even if this doesn't get read, I really feel like I just need to share what I've experienced. I moved into a freshly built house with my parents at the end of 2020. It was on top of a hill overlooking a tree-filled valley, and in the valley there's this big concreted area that has these little tiny villa-type houses dotted throughout the valley. They're all abandoned, but sometimes at night I would see a light from inside of one of the villas, though I always thought it was just maybe kids exploring. However, I learned that it was the remains of an old mental asylum that had been shut down 20 years prior, and they had just finished knocking down the main buildings. I went down there to explore a few times, and I just had a really odd feeling. Throughout the valley, there were remains of gardens, tennis courts, lawn, and it honestly looked quite beautiful, just slowly being swallowed up by nature. But I couldn't get over how it made me feel. Walking through it during the day, I felt an eerie normalcy, if that makes sense, like at the start of a horror movie when it's bright and sunny, but you know the main character is about to be scarred for life. It was even worse at night. I went with some friends to explore, and there was a lot of graffiti on the walls, weird symbols, which were freaky enough, but what got me is there was these little eyes painted on the inside of every house. There was nothing wrong with the eyes, but they just really got to me for some reason. The whole time I felt like something was watching from around the corner or just beyond the tree. After that night, I started having a reoccurring nightmare. It's important to note that I slept with my door open so my kitty could freely wander. In my dream, I woke up in my bed and I saw a light shining from the front of the house. I got up to investigate, thinking a light was left on in the kitchen or something. When I got to the front door, it was wide open. I walked outside to see the entire valley on fire. I turned to run inside and get my parents, and I always trip and woke up. Every time I woke up to see the figure of a little boy slipping out of my room. I never saw his face or managed to catch up with him. A little while after that, I was walking through the valley with my dad, and we came across an unmarked children's cemetery. Dad said that before the asylum was built, it was a boys' orphanage and that it had been burned to the ground. Naturally, I did some research, and I learned some not-so-good history of the valley. The orphanage was built in the 1860s and housed children from very violent/neglectful families, as well as boys with behavioral issues. They were supposed to be taught vocational training in trades, bootmaking, carpentry, etc. From what I have heard, it was more like forced labor. There are records saying that the boys were punished with up to 3 months of solitary confinement in dark cells. They got whipped, beaten, and there were allegations of SA by staff members. There were 6 reported deaths, but I've heard that there were a lot more. A 17-year-old drowned in a shallow creek trying to escape, and in 1903 it burnt to the ground, unaliving an 8-year-old boy. I think this boy is the one I see in my dreams. After that was when it became the asylum. It would house people with mental illnesses like schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, women with hysteria, learning disabilities, as well as social admissions, older people with no family, homeless people. It's essentially used to get the undesirables out of the public eye to make the city more tasteful. The deeper into the valley you went, the crazier the patients were, and if you weren't crazy when you went in, you certainly were when you came out. There have been rumors of SA and physical abuse from staff. Multiple survivors say that they were forcibly given ECT, conclusive therapy, without anesthetic or muscle relaxants, and excessively restrained. One survivor said that he woke up spitting out teeth. Also incredibly overcrowded, with 4 staff members caring for up to 60 to 80 patients, forcing them to work. Patients who passed away were buried in unmarked graves. It was shut down in the year 2000, and it just sat there for years, until a part of it burned down in 2017, and the rest of the main building got knocked down. A couple weeks since learning all of this, I haven't dreamt about the fire, but I feel like the little boy is still here. Maybe he just wanted to be known or remembered, or maybe he's lonely. I struggle to believe that it's a coincidence that everything in the valley burns to the ground and that I've been having these dreams. I don't know, and no one's ever had any similar experiences. Thank you so much for reading. I love watching your videos. Lots of love from Atia Roa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Emily XX. First of all, Emily, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I can relate on so many levels. As you know from watching my videos, my parents' house was actually a boys' home. It was converted to a boys' home where they were sent when they were orphans or they were in trouble, also to do forced labor. But at their home, it was on a farm. Your dreams aren't a coincidence, not at least in my opinion. I believe that dreams a lot of times can really help you understand different feelings and emotions that you're having as an empath. And I think that when you're really intuitive, spirits will find different ways to communicate with you. The reason that the boy might be connecting with you, I can't say for sure, but it could be possible that maybe he wants a release. Maybe he's kind of just stuck there. Maybe there's something he's wanting you to find out about how he passed. Like, was the fire actually what took him out, or was it something else? Those are all things that I would start to question and wonder. As you know, with my parents' house, I have a really strong drive to figure out what has happened to the missing people from the house, and just to answer a lot of questions I have had. So I thoroughly understand that kind of obsessive feeling of wanting to solve something that you feel like you're on the brink of, but you just don't know. My advice is to just listen to your gut. Try to find everything that you can in any old archives, newspaper articles, people who lived in the area. The more information that you know, the better. Again, thank you so much for submitting. Now, to everybody else watching, if you guys would like to share your scary story with me for a chance to be read on my page, my email is located in my bio of this page. You can go ahead and submit your story, and I will try to get to it when I can. As always, thank you so much for watching. Love you. Bye.
So just imagine meeting someone on a dating app and they put black magic on you. What's up, cousins? So I am back with another story time, and just like any time before, let's not waste no time and let's get into it. So for this story, we're going to call her Candy. Okay, so Candy's father had just passed. So Candy's sister called her and told her she was finna come pick her up so they could go ahead and handle all the arrangements. So her sister come and picks Candy up. They ride out to their uncle's house on their father's side, the one that passed away. Now, they said when they got there that they was inhaling trees, and she wanted to join in because she said due to all the pain that she was in from just losing her father, she wanted to just take her mind off of his death. So right now they all high as a kite. Now Candy said that she started feeling a little weird because the girls that her sister had also brought along with her started looking at her weird. So in the midst of this, she's texting the person that she met off the dating app. We're going to call him Ray. So she's telling Ray like she feels uncomfortable, she wants to go, and she also tells her sister that she's ready to leave. So they left. They ended up stopping by a gas station. So her sister asks, hey, do anyone want anything from the gas station? Candy said that she's going to go inside with her. She ended up getting her some water. So as they began driving off from the store, Candy got this paranoid feeling like something is just going on. She told them to pull over, let her outside the car. She had her cousin come pick her up and take her to the hospital to find out that the trees that she was inhaling was laced. Candy said it affected her so bad to where she had to stay in the hospital, and she did end up missing her father's funeral. So after all of this had happened, Candy was clinging more and more to Ray. However, she figured they were just messing around for fun. Like, he'd come to her house every day. He'd spend the night with her. He would leave to go to work from her house. So everything was good. Everything was smooth until about 2 months goes by. Then she started noticing Ray's anger and his behavior and how he would get mad when she would want to do certain things or say certain things. Then she started noticing how controlling he was becoming. Now, shortly after that, she noticed how her funds kept declining and how it was so much chaos going on in her life. Now, she was not new to getting tarot reads, so she did ended up seeking a practitioner and getting a tarot reading done to see what was going on with her life. The practitioner told Candy that Ray did not have good intentions at all, and he was doing black magic on her and her kids. He also told her that Ray's going to continue doing spell work on her because he doesn't want her to be successful, doesn't want her to be nothing in life, and he wants to harm her. Ray was also doing spell work to have mind control over Candy. The practitioner said that Ray felt like Candy was too good for him, and that was something that he hated. Candy said shortly after, she had a dream about Ray, and God showed her exactly what he was trying to do and how he was trying to harm her, and it was the same thing that the practitioner told her that he was doing. So fast forward, one day she's out shopping at this particular store. She saw him drive by, and she had to act like she didn't see him because in her mind she's wondering, how the hell did you even know I'm here? That's when she realized that Ray had put a monitoring spirit on her to see everything she was doing and everywhere she was going. And not only that, when Christmas came around, the person that Ray was living with bought Candy kids some used toys for Christmas. And Candy said she felt like it was something attached to these toys. She took everything that was given to them and threw them away. Some time go by and Ray wants to meet up. So Candy's kind of curious to see what did he want to talk about. So Candy invites him over to her house for a conversation. Now, as they're conversating about whatever they're talking about, they decided to exchange phones and go through each other phone. Now, as he's going through her phone, she wanted her phone back. Now, when she asked for her phone back, he threw it at her face and split her eyebrow. They ended up getting into it. She kicks him out the house. Now, she calls 911 to get some assistance. So when the ambulance gets there, they take her to the hospital. She gets stitched up. So after she's done at the hospital, she ends up calling an Uber to take her back home. Now, when the Uber pulled up and she got in the car, she said the vibe was off and it was weird. And out of nowhere, he put this hoodie on to cover his face. And then he proceeded to take a whole different route from where it was telling him to even go. So she calls her family member and told her family member, like, hey, something is off, something's not right. She told the Uber to let her out the car. So he stopped where they was at and let her out the car. She ends up requesting another Uber. They pull up, she gets in the car. Now, this Uber driver decided to speed. So in the midst of that, she's calling the cops, letting them know, like, hey, he's speeding, this and that. And she's telling him to let her out the car. However, he's not slowing down. So she has to jump out of a moving car. Now, Candy couldn't shake this feeling of being vulnerable, so she ends up calling Ray. Now, in the midst of their conversation, Ray ends up bringing up the highway that she jumped out on while she was in that Uber. Mind you, Candy didn't even mention to him the Uber accident, let alone the highway it even happened on. Candy says she do believe Ray is a warlock and that he was placing spirits into her home, and she feels like he tapped into her phone as well because her phone couldn't keep a charge for nothing. Her battery kept dying. But not only did it stop there, Candy started seeing shadowed figures in her home. She also had a dream that Ray was working with other practitioners to keep her binded to him. She said to this day, her and her kids wake up with scratches on their bodies. This is something that Candy is still dealing with. So again, y'all, if you have a story that you want to submit, make sure you DM it to me, or you can email it to the email that's in my bio. Okay? Until then, enjoy this story.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this man who blew his entire retirement fund, which was around 2.5 million, trying to get a snake so that he can get richer. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, and the snake keeps on taking his family members one by one. If you guys didn't know, this thing of going to get snakes to try and get them to make you rich, it does not work for everybody. Not everybody prospers in that department. Anyways, let's get into the story time. So this man had a retirement fund or whatever that came out. He hears this story about this Malawian witch doctor that can make you rich, whatever. And he thinks about it. He's like, you know what, then if I don't get a plan, this money is going to finish, right? He decides, no, you know what, I'm gonna get into contact with this witch doctor, and I'm gonna speak to this witch doctor, and I'm gonna get richer, right? Sharp. He finds this man's number, he calls him, and they get on the phone, they speak. Man's is like, listen, I need you to bring me 200k. You know, in South African rands, it was 200,000. I don't know in the Malawian currency, but he's like, I need that much. Bring it to me, and I'm gonna do the things for you. Shapo gets on a plane, goes to Malawi. Man's is splurging, by the way. Like, he's just spending, like, he knows that money is coming. Goes to Malawi, sleeps in a nice hotel, goes to this guy's place, gets him a snake. The snake was like really tiny when he first got it, you know? And the guy is like, listen, how many times a year do you want to sacrifice, you know? Mind you, the smaller times a year that you want to sacrifice, the bigger the sacrifice. So he was like, hey, listen, I'll come back every 3 months to come and sacrifice for the snake. Man says, oh, the witch doctor is like, Shapo, okay, cool. He's like, listen, the snake, first of all, the requirements for the snake, a sacrifice every 3 months. It has to have its own room in the house. You're the only person that's gonna be able to see the snake, right? Sharp. So this man tells him, like, under no circumstances should you kill the snake. Do you understand? This is the type of snake that lives until, and somebody has to take over when you die. So he's like, chill. Isn't he hearing that, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be getting money? Sharp. Gets on a plane, comes back home, right? When he gets home, money, dololo. Oh, I forgot to mention, when he was at Malawi, they sacrificed a chicken for the snake. Isn't they start small by small and then it eventually gets bigger? I don't think this man thought about that, but anyways. So they sacrificed the chicken. He's back home, no money, nothing. He cleared a room for the snake and there's still nothing. Nada. Mind you, the witch doctor told him, like, as soon as you land and you put the snake in its own room, I promise you, you're gonna get rich. Did that happen? Nope. Mind you, that did not happen. He waits a week, he waits 2 weeks, nothing is happening. He's still in communication with this witch doctor, like, my guy, what's going on? Like, I'm not getting the money. Like, what's happening? It's like, no, be patient. 3 months pass by and the guy tells him, come back, my dear. Come back so that we can give the snake a sacrifice. Mans is like, okay. Goes back to sacrifice again. They sacrifice 2 chickens this time and a goat. 3, he comes back again, guys. Nothing is happening. Like, I feel like at some point he should have seen that, like, this is not real at all. It's never going to happen. 3 months, another 3 months passes by. They sacrifice a cow. He goes back another 3 months. He sacrificed a cow this time. 2 cows this time. Nothing is happening. And this witch doctor is like, yo, we need to find out, like, what's going on, because I don't understand. Let me come to your house. At this point, he's already spent a lot of money, thinking that he just started spending his money recklessly, the retirement fund, thinking that one day he's going to make a lot of money, right? Shapo, time goes by, guys. This Malawian guy decides, let me come that side. Mind you, he's already spent like a lot of money. Like, he had 2.5 million, guys. You should understand is a lot of money. But at this point, this man is starting to realize that this is never going to work out. He already bought a new house, at least fully furnished house. He bought a car. You know, he had a family, right? But his family didn't know what he was doing. So he basically, I think he bought two houses. Yeah, he bought 2 houses. The main house was for the family, and then there was a smaller house where he kept the snake that was not giving him any money. At this point, Mans is left with like around 500k, right? Sharp. The Malawian witch doctor decides, let me come that side, man. Maybe the problem is the house. It's not me, because I've been doing what I need to do for you. Oba? He asked this guy, how much do you have in your bank account left? Maybe the snake wants more money. He's like, oh, I have a young 500k in my, I don't know how I don't know how they made him like just give out his bank balances like that, because that's crazy. Guys, like, listen, go to the bank, take out that entire 500,000 and leave it as a stack of cash. The guy's like, okay. He does exactly what He does exactly what he needs to do. Ne? Chapo. He leaves the stack of cash inside the snake's room. Understand? He leaves the money inside the snake's room and he goes to his house or whatever. And the Malawian witch doctor is sleeping in that same house with that 500k. What do you think happened next? You guys, this Malawian witch doctor stole that entire 500,000, took it, got on a plane, left. This man was left with nothing but that snake of his. And guess what he does? Remember in the beginning I told you guys that they told him that under no circumstances are you going to kill the snake. He realizes that his money is gone and this person has been scamming him. He decides, you know what? He thinks that this snake is just a regular snake and he kills it. He kills it and he burns. Oh, he kills it and then he burns it. He throws it in the trash. And he thinks, no, you know what? I'm going to rent this house. As soon as he left, that house caught on fire. It burnt to ashes. He goes home to his wife. One of the kids suddenly gets sick and dies. The wife decides, I don't want to be with you anymore. Because obviously the wife probably might have went to someone and they told them that the person who's at fault is your husband. And she's like, she left the husband. She left and she took her other kids. She left him with his house. She left him with everything. So this man has a car, number one. He has a car that's not running. For some reason, the car stopped working. Number two, the house is a house, but he can't sell it for some reason. There's never food in the house. There's never petrol in the cars. And people of his family are dying. Every single year, people in his family die. And they die at a certain time. Like, say, for example, August is around the corner. That person dies. Next year, same story. Next year, same story. All because of greed. Apparently, even if he killed that snake will forever be attached to him, whether you kill it or not. And he doesn't even know where that Malawi witch doctor is. He doesn't even have money at this point to go back to Malawi. You guys should be careful of people on the internet. People are going to scam you. People know how to use herbs, traditional herbs, to make you a fool so that you just spend money and spend money and spend money. Desperacy.
I have another spooky story for you guys. This one was submitted by someone who worked as a cam girl for years and never had a single issue until one of her subscribers suddenly changed and she started having some very strange experiences in her own apartment. Let's just get right into the story. I've never shared this story publicly, mostly because my family doesn't know what I do for work and would never approve if they found out. For years, I've kept this part of my life separated from everything else, and the only person I've ever confided in is my closest friend, who still doesn't know the full truth. What happened to me during that time is something I've struggled to understand, and even now, I'm not entirely sure how to make sense of it. I've been a cam girl for several years, and despite the stigma around it, my job was always surprisingly uneventful. I had a routine, a stable list of regulars, and had developed a way of balancing the emotional distance I needed with the friendliness that kept people coming back. Most people were harmless, mostly just lonely and a bit odd, but no one ever made me feel unsafe. At least, that was until one of my longtime subscribers, who I'll call Evan, suddenly changed. For almost 3 years, he was polite, generous, and never pushed for anything beyond what I was comfortable offering. He would ask me about my day before he asked about anything else. He listened when I talked about being exhausted or overwhelmed or even scared that someone in my family would eventually learn how I earned my income. In a strange way, he made the job feel less isolating, which is probably why I ignored the early signs that something with Evan had changed. It started out subtle. His messages became shorter and slightly off-putting. Not at all like what I was used to from him. He stopped asking about my life and instead became highly critical of my appearance and fixated on whether I was talking to other men on or off camera. He randomly accused me of losing interest in him and would go on long rants about how I abandoned him when he needed me most. I had no idea what he was talking about. So then I blocked him for a few days, hoping the distance would help him cool off, but that was when the strange things began happening
in my apartment. I would hear what sounded like faint whispering behind me when I removed my headphones. I thought I was just imagining things or that my ears were going bad from wearing headphones too long. I also started to feel cold drafts throughout different parts of my apartment, even though I'd never felt them before. But it seemed like the longer I ignored them, the more persistent these instances became. The activity intensified whenever I tried to work. My computer would freeze midstream, and the chat window would suddenly fill with the same phrase Evan used to send when he was checking in on me. "Are you still there?" It kept happening even though he was blocked and his account hadn't been active for weeks. One night while recording a video for a different subscriber, the file was suddenly corrupted. When I replayed it, my voice was layered with something that made my stomach twist. A slow, heavy breathing, as if someone was standing directly behind me while I recorded. The breathing wasn't present while I was filming, and the microphone I use doesn't pick up background noise unless something is extremely close. I got scared and deleted the file immediately. Out of desperation, I confided in my best friend. She's the only person who knows about my cam work, and even she struggled to understand what was happening. Her first thought was that Evan might be hacking into my equipment, using some kind of remote access software to monitor me or manipulate my recordings. She asked me to send her a voice note explaining everything so that she could forward it to someone that she knew in cybersecurity. So I recorded the voice note, trying to sound calm despite how on edge I felt. Before sending it, I played it back to make sure I hadn't misspoken. My blood went completely cold when I realized I could hear the same heavy breathing. This time, I was in a different spot in my apartment from where I do my cam work, and the voice note was recorded on my phone, not my cam work equipment. So I sent the recording to my friend, who forwarded it to the cybersecurity guy. Long story short, he did a full analysis of my phone and computer and did not find anything that would explain what I was experiencing. From that point forward, the disturbances escalated in ways that felt increasingly personal. Some nights I would hear the gentle clicking of my keyboard, as if someone was typing quietly. Other times I'd walk into the room and find my computer turned on, even though I always shut it off before sleeping. The more it happened, the more convinced I became that Evan had somehow found me, physically, not just digitally. I imagined him stalking me, breaking into my apartment when I wasn't home, and tampering with my devices. I was terrified of being watched and of what he might do next. So I went to the police, not to report anything paranormal, but simply to report a man who might be stalking me. I provided his username, email, and all of the unsettling messages that he'd been sending me. While the officer was writing up the report, he stopped typing and turned his computer screen towards me. Evan's face was on the screen, along with his personal information. The officer asked me to confirm that was him, which I did. Then he pointed to a line on the screen that read, "Deceased." The date was from several months ago, right around the time the tone of his messages had changed and the breathing and whispering had started. The officer suggested that someone else might be using his account, which would make sense, except it didn't explain what was happening inside my apartment. Of course, the police wouldn't investigate further, and so I was left with no answers. That was several years ago. I've since moved into a new home and have all new computer equipment. The activity has never fully stopped, but it has lessened since I started working a regular job and moved cam work to the side. It's as if scaling back the interactions reduced whatever hold Evan had on me. Still, on certain nights, when I'm reviewing my earnings or prepping a stream, I'll hear a soft whisper behind me or a light tapping sound. When this happens, I just tell Evan that I hear him and ask him to keep it down while I work. That generally gets him to stop. So, I guess I live with Evan. So what do you guys think is happening to her? Is this some sort of jealousy from beyond the grave? Or is this just a regular stalker? Let me know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
If you're already laying in bed, do not go back outside. Today I'm wearing these earrings that Pauline sent me to my P.O. box. They're like little Christmas wreaths. This lady's name is Mariana. She is 44 years old and she is from Manzanillo. The story that she's about to tell us happened a year ago in July, and she doesn't know if it was just like a weird coincidence or it was something paranormal. At the time, she was working at a convenience store and she would leave work every day at 9 p.m. She remembers this day clearly because it was a Friday and she was off Saturday and Sunday, so she always looked forward to sleeping in. She also didn't have a boyfriend at the time, so she explains how her routine was the same every single day. She would go to work, she would go home, she would eat, she would shower, and she would go to sleep. At the time, she also stopped going out to parties and things like that, so she really didn't hang out with her friends very often. So that Friday, just like her regular routine, she went home, she ate, she took a shower. She said that she went to bed around 11 p.m. and then she was awoken at 2 a.m. because her phone was ringing. When she glances at her phone, she notices that it's her best friend, and she just decided to not pick it up because she really wanted to go to sleep. However, she noticed that the calls were frequent and they kept calling and calling her, so she thought it was an emergency and she ends up answering the phone. When she answers, she asks her best friend, "Hey, is everything okay? What's going on?" And her friend, loud and laughing, was like, "Wake up, you're gonna go party with us, we're going to the beach." Her friend tells her that she has other friends there and that her husband will be driving. Her friend was like, "Don't be a party pooper, let's go, I'm gonna go pick you up." Mariana actually thought about it because she said that she really did need a good distraction. She imagined herself, with the sun rising at the beach, having the drinks with her friends. She even imagined herself in the car just smelling that beach breeze. And just when she was about to say yes, her father's words came into her mind immediately. "If you're already in bed and somebody calls you out, do not go out." She explains how she even got like goosebumps just thinking about what her dad said, so she actually decided to tell her friend no and lie to her and say that she had to go to work the next day. Her friend ends up telling her, "Come on, don't be boring," and she tries to insist, but she tells her no, and then the call just ends. She laid there for a bit just thinking if she should have gone and maybe she should have said yes, and not even 5 minutes later, she gets another call. It was another friend that was in the car with her best friend trying to convince her to go. She tells her, "Come on, you're already awake, come with us, we're gonna have a good time." She was this close to saying yes again, but again she got that weird feeling that she should not leave her home, so she ended up telling her no and that she is so sorry that she has to work tomorrow, and that was the end of the call. She ends up putting her phone on do not disturb and she goes right back to bed. The following morning, she wakes up at 9 a.m. She looks at her phone and she sees that she has a lot of missed calls. All of the calls were from her best friend, so she did try to call her back, but she didn't answer. She figured maybe her phone had died or maybe she was still partying or sleeping in or drunk or something. She really didn't give it that much importance, but the days passed. It was Sunday and Monday and she still never heard back from her best friend. Not only was she not answering her phone calls, but she wasn't answering her text messages either. She was starting to get really worried, but she also thought maybe her best friend was really mad at her for not going out with them that night, so she decided to just give her a little bit of space. On Wednesday, while she is at work, she ends up getting a phone call with a number that she didn't recognize, and without thinking, she answered the phone. It was her best friend's mom. The lady says, "Is this Mariana? You're my daughter's best friend." And she tells her, "Yes, can I help you with something?" And she asked if she had heard the news. She explained that the lady started crying, and in between her crying, she ends up telling her that her daughter had passed away that night that they were inviting her to go out with them. They did end up going to the beach, but apparently they had all been drinking, including her friend's husband who was driving and who claimed that he didn't drink. They were hitting a sharp turn on the way to the beach and the guy lost control and ended up going off a cliff, and every single person in that car passed away. They didn't even find them until Tuesday afternoon. The second she heard all of this, she said that her blood pressure went down. She had to hold on to the wall just so that she wouldn't fall. It was definitely a big shock to her. She couldn't believe that, they had all passed away, that her friend that she had just talked 2 days ago was no longer here. She admits that she ends up hanging up on that lady without even saying anything. She ran to the restroom and she cried like she had never cried before. Her hands were shaking, and the only thing that she could think about in that moment was her dad and that phrase, because that phrase had literally saved her life. So a year and a few months have passed, and she says that she misses her best friend, she loves her, and that every night she does pray for her and thank God and thanks her dad for that phrase that has basically kept her alive.
If you've been looking for another creepy search and rescue story from Rob, I got number 13 for you. This story is from one of his former trainers who is now an EMT, and we're going to call him Ethan. Ethan specialized in finding lost kids, and he was pretty well known for almost having a sixth sense when it came to locating these children. They were out looking for an 11-year-old boy named Joey, and he had gone missing near a river. Of course, the first thought was that he might have fallen in and drowned, but then when they released the canines, they actually directed the group away from the river. In fact, the dogs led the group up into a very dense area in the forest. It's important to note that when they do searches like this, they span out and they form like a grid pattern almost visually like a checkerboard. And then the teammates spend their time thoroughly searching each square until they move on to the next one, just to make sure that they don't miss anything. And it didn't take very long to realize there was a strange pattern emerging. The dogs kept picking up his scent in like alternating grids, and then they'd lose it when they'd get to the next one. So if you imagine a checkerboard and there's black and white boxes, the dogs would find his scent in only all of the black boxes, but none of the white. Obviously, this didn't even make any sense. Like, how could the kid be bouncing around from grid area to grid area? So as if it's not weird enough, along the search, Ethan spots a staircase in the middle of nowhere about 50 yards away. Says, we gotta go check out the area around them, and his partner flat out refuses. If you're not familiar with the staircase in the middle of nowhere, you should go back and listen to some of my other videos. It'll explain it a little bit better. That's a fun rabbit hole to go down. But anyway, he told Ethan that he made it a point that he is never going to go near a set of staircases in the woods, ever. He tells Ethan he'll stay within sight, but he's gonna let him go check around the stairs. Ethan says that when he got closer to the stairs, he could tell there was something on the bottom step curled up. Ethan's heart sinks because right away he could tell it was that kid, and he would think that since the child was only missing for a few hours that he would be fine, but upon further inspection, when Ethan got to him, he was clearly passed away. He was curled up in a little ball holding his stomach, and it appeared that he had been in horrible pain. He said the only blood that he saw was a little bit on his mouth and chin. Ethan radios back that they found him, and they got his body back pretty swiftly, and of course the family was absolutely devastated. Everyone was completely baffled because, like, why or how could this child just be unalived? He was only gone a short amount of time, and there were no obvious signs of what could have happened, so it just made things even more confusing. Ethan says that they don't always hear back from the coroners as to the cause of death because most of the time it's really none of their business anyway. Now in this case, he actually did get a call back about a week later, and they were asking him, do you remember that kid that you found that had been unalived? Obviously Ethan was like, yes, of course, and then they went on to say some seriously weird shit is going on here. This guy goes, Ethan, you're gonna think we're crazy, but the coroner has no idea what happened to this kid. Trigger warning, this does discuss the autopsy's findings. So the coroner said that when he opened the child up, all of his internal organs looked like Swiss cheese. There were quarter-sized holes punched clean through almost every organ. Now, this was aside from his heart and lungs, but his colon, kidneys, stomach, even testicle had these holes punched through that were so precise and perfect. It was quite literally like someone took a large hole punch and just went to town, creating these perfect circles all throughout. And the weirdest part was there was no exit or entry wounds. It was like it was all done inside somehow. They ruled it as just massive internal bleeding, but quite literally they have no idea what happened. Ethan says he's never been able to forget about that poor child, and he even has nightmares about it sometimes. He says he used to love the outdoors, but now when they go, if they go at all, he does not let his children go anywhere near them alone, and if they do go near the woods, he never takes his eyes off of them. Rob says that after Ethan told him his story, right before they parted ways, Ethan put his hand on Rob's shoulder and looked at him very intensely and said, there are bad things out there, things that don't care if we have families or lives, or that we can think and feel. And then he just said, be careful out there. And with that, he turned and walked away. I'm at a loss for words. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will check in and see if there are any other search and rescue stories.
Kira had a Halloween deadline approaching for the Ipswich Inquirer. We need something weird, something scary, something twisted, her chief editor Vanessa demanded. Kira heard local rumblings about the Ruby Pretender, a fishing vessel seen sailing in the distance off the coast of Suffolk with no one aboard. There was no sign of the captain, Leonard Chase, no distress signal had been made, and a search by the Coast Guard showed no clues as to what really happened aboard the boat. Do what you can, find the boat, just come back with a story, Kate. Kira was torn. She'd lost her mum in a boating accident years ago, and wouldn't this just dredge up the past? She could have rustled up some nonsense about the Black Shuck, trumped up a few recent sightings and be done with it. But she did have to admit the story was intriguing. And the story went that, as the Captain Leonard set course to dock in Felixstowe, some freak accident must have forced him overboard, despite no signs of a struggle. No inclement weather and no hint whatsoever that anything had gone horribly wrong. Most strange of all, a half-finished cup of coffee was found at the helm, and the life jacket was hanging neatly where it should have been. Locals deemed it a ghost ship, the captain having been dragged to his death by a spirit of the sea. Disturbingly, no body has been found, and from what Kira could find, Leonard Chase was described as meticulous, loving, and dedicated to the ocean. The idea that he threw himself over was dismissed by all who knew and met him. His name was familiar, but she could only find a grainy photo of a white bearded man holding up a fish and grinning by various boats from afar. Kira had secured access on board the now moored and empty vessel. The port officer had sounded strange when she called for the request. "You're more than welcome, miss. Not many folk round here aboard the Ruby now. We keep well away. I say best not to pry, but then I'd be a rotten hack now, wouldn't I?" She grimaced. Kira already hated being at sea, but she needed to crack on. So on a stormy Friday night, the week before Halloween, Kira drove to the coast, armed with a torch, a sleeping bag, a camping stove and some tampons. Kira lit a candle. She shivered. It was deathly cold. Everything was terribly neat and tidy. It made her feel more creeped out. "Hello? Who's there?" Her heart was racing. She heard rocks crash. She jumped onto the deck. There were no boats docked nearby, and the shoreline was totally empty. She swung her lantern to and fro, trying to find the source. Someone had thrown rocks at the boat. She was sure of it. But nothing. She ducked back into the boat and lit up the stove to make a hot chocolate. That'd calm her down. She considered a big fat doobie in her purse, but she decided she'd puff on that later.
Yeah, nice.
She needed to write at least part of the article first. She looked around her. She'd start where the mug of coffee was found. She sat in the captain's chair. She was going to put herself in his shoes, imagined what might have happened. She clambered into the cockpit and shut her eyes. She tried to imagine what Leonard went through the night of his disappearance. She couldn't help but hear distant whispering across the waves, and the unmistakable sound of the rope binding her to the dock being slowly untethered. Kira kept her eyes shut. What was that? Her eyes shot open immediately. The sound of a book being leafed through. A diary. It appeared before her, a tatty, dark, red leather-bound journal. It was open on what looked like its final entry. And there was a photograph of a young couple in the sunshine at the bow of the Ruby Pretender. Kira knew the woman immediately. Of course she did. In long, slanted writing, Kira read the following. Saturday, 22nd of October, 12:01 a.m. She's here. I know she is. She's coming for me. God rest my soul, she's coming for me. Punishing me for what I did. Kira dropped the diary. Someone was on the boat. "Who's there? I've got a knife." She pulled out a knife. Then she heard the unmistakable sound of her mother. "That won't help you. Come out onto the deck. I'm waiting for you." Kira's heart hammered in her chest. She stepped out onto the deck, and there she was, her mother. Long dark hair, gills in her neck. Her skin was shining emerald green and her eyes were red. The Ruby Pretender. Kira could feel her whole body tremble. "Mum?" she muttered. "What did Leonard do?"
"We were in love. But then I met your father. I left Leonard. But he was a very jealous man. And when I told him, here on the Ruby Pretender, he pushed me. Tell everyone, Kira. Tell the world my truth."
The ghastly, tragic form of her mother turned around, climbed gracefully to the railings of the boat, and hurled herself into the sea below. Kira mouthed goodbye, wiped her tears away, and with a grim realization she knew she had her Halloween article all right, and it wasn't going to stay in Ipswich.
Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. A couple of years ago, it was me and my best friend. We would go camping with their family, and I would stay at their house a lot. Both of us are witches, and we believe in spirits. Every time I would sleep over at my friend's house on their living room sofa, I would get weird dreams, normally with a spooky entity or something just off. The entities I saw in my dreams were always pure black, sometimes inky, if that makes sense. One night I had a dream about being on my friend's farm with their grandma. and I was outside and it was getting dark when all of a sudden I see a large wolf-like creature. It was pure black and it was pouncing at me, and I woke up sweating and in shock. I looked around, no clue what time it was, and I feel at least 3 spirits in the room with me, which isn't unusual for my friend's house, since we're sure it's a portal for them. One of them was kind of comforting in a way. She didn't do anything. The others were men, and one of them was having the time of his death, freaking me out. He was just staring at me. Somehow I managed to go back to sleep, and when I mentioned the dream to my friend the next morning, they said they had the exact same dream as me, except the wolf creature was pure white. We've also done big slumber parties at their house, and boy do we attract spirits. There have been nights where I was so overstimulated by the amount of spirits in the house, I started sobbing and was in physical distress. I've always lived with spirits, so it's a normal thing for me, but my friend's house being a portal and having so many spirits is really draining sometimes. I was having a sleepover at my house with my cousins when I was 13. It was all normal. We were sharing secrets, watching movies. When it came to sleeping arrangements, me and my younger cousin slept in the spare room in our basement. My cousin fell asleep really fast, but I had a hard time falling asleep. I started to hear someone calling my name. It repeated my name 3 times and stopped. It was clear as day, as if someone were standing on the basement stairs. I checked to see if anyone was there, but I saw nothing and eventually fell asleep. The next day, I asked my other cousins if they were playing a prank on me, and they all insisted they were sleeping. A few days later, I was cleaning the house, and I went down to the basement, and there I saw a shadow on the basement wall. It looked like a little girl with pigtails or something. I ran upstairs and never went down there again. Now I have a house of my own, a baby boy and a husband, and I swear I still hear my name being whispered. One night, me and some of my closest friends went on a camping trip in the middle of the forest. While we were out there, one of my friends went to use the bathroom, but he suddenly came back running and repeating, "Everyone, we have to go. Everyone, we have to go." We tried asking him why, but he was too overwhelmed to explain. We told him to calm down because we had been planning this trip for over a month, so there was nothing that could make us go home early. Later on, we were all having fun laughing around the campfire, and I thought I heard rustling in the trees but didn't think much of it until one of my friends started hearing whispers. All of a sudden, we heard a stomach-dropping cry, and we all quickly huddled in the tent, turning off all the lights besides the campfire. The car was only a 1-minute walk, but none of us wanted to go out there, so we hid in the tent. We started hearing deep scratching noises but couldn't tell what it was. 2 of my friends ended up falling asleep while me and my other friends stayed awake. That's when we heard it. Loud screaming and chanting that we couldn't understand. We shook our sleeping friends awake and immediately started to pack up and run to the car quickly. Then we saw a group of people wearing bright white robes running towards our car. They were throwing rocks at the car and banging on it. We drove out of there quickly and got away, but it still haunts me to this day. Let's read another scary Reddit story. My wife heard a skinwalker in our house last night. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken up to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat. After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for a motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my pistol. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night, I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off till we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room and the door was closed. So whatever was in our house or at our front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was a skinwalker, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all of the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before us. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We just got home, and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access has been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there, and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious and just thinking about what could be going on. Okay, so what do y'all think? Is it a skinwalker? Is it a ghost, spirit, haunted house type thing? Or is someone secretly living in their attic? What do y'all think?
I mean, that's pretty much what it is, like a human social experiment, because it shows you the way that human beings would act if there were no consequences. Results, terrifying. I'm going to try and pronounce her name correctly, but in 1974, performance artist Marina Abramovic performed a 6-hour piece in which she stood completely still, completely silent, while the audience was told that they could do whatever they wanted to do to her with 72 objects that were laid out on a table. This was known as Rhythm Zero, and the purpose of it was to see essentially how people behave when they are given absolute power. Marina Abramovic is a very famous performance artist, and her whole thing is using performance as art, obviously. But from the beginning of her career, she wasn't interested in creating art that people simply looked at. She wanted to create art by performing something that forced people to feel and forced people to confront their own feelings, more oftentimes than not, those feelings being uncomfortable and or disturbing. She grew up in post-war Yugoslavia and was raised under strict discipline and control, which I do think eventually heavily shaped her to have some sort of obsession, maybe the correct word is fascination, with endurance, authority, and obedience. Marina is known for making her art and performing it by using her own body as a form of art and by exploring the physical and mental limits of a human being. So in 1974, when she was only 23 years old, she decides to conduct what is known as Rhythm Zero. This was part of a rhythm series that she had. And like I said, Rhythm Zero was basically meant to see what happens when the rules disappear and people are left alone with their own impulses, as well as the concept of individual responsibility versus collective responsibility. And this is often talked about when it comes to true crime discussions because it shows how a normal person can commit extreme acts as soon as the boundaries are removed and doing these horrible things without being labeled as evil. This happened in Naples, Italy from 8 p.m. to 2 in the morning. Marina stood completely still without moving or saying a word while the audience, the people of the general public, could do whatever they wanted from the objects on the table. The objects ranged from harmless things such as a feather, perfume, pens, a hairbrush, a candle, lipstick, flowers, all the way to potentially very dangerous items such as scissors, a razor, chains, and weapons. And the rules were that Marina would not resist, she would not react, and she would accept full responsibility for whatever happened without anyone facing any consequences. An art critic who was present throughout the entire thing said that at first, quote, "The performance began tamely. Someone turned her around, another person thrusted her arm into the air," end quote. I also know there was a person who grabbed a feather, tickled her arm with it, another person gave her items to hold, but eventually what was done to her got very dark very quickly. Even though initially people were hesitant to pick up any of the dangerous items present, eventually they started to, and they began using some of those objects to inflict pain onto her to test if Marina would either resist or react. One person slapped her across the face, then another man grabbed one of the sharp items on the table to use on her shirt. Within 3 hours, all of her clothing had been cut off. It was all on the ground. The man who cut the shirt off then used the shirt to cover Marina's eyes and touch her intimately, which is so incredible. Like, the lack of respect in that room was not present, and he did it for no other reason than he could and he wanted to. And it suddenly became an uncomfortable, tense feeling of power dynamic at play between Marina and the audience. The man doing that only encouraged others to continue using items in more extreme ways with absolutely no respect for Marina as a human being at all. Other men also did whatever they wanted to her, call it SA, call it what it is. Someone wrote the word vile on a piece of paper, handed it to her for her to hold. Another person took a rose, took the thorns off of the rose, and started sticking them onto Marina's skin. Other people used the sharp items on her until she bled in areas including her neck. And listen to this. A man used a razor to create such a deep injury into her neck. She has a scar to this day, and when she started bleeding, he started drinking it. I'm sorry. In a room full of people, by the way. Others were carving letters onto her skin. A group of men then picked her up, wrapped her up in some sort of fabric, and tied her up with the chains, then placed one of the weapons flat onto her in between her and the chains. The entire time, by the way, Marina showed no emotion. She had tears running down her face, but she was showing little to none facial expressions. And I keep saying men because it was mostly men. Marina later said that it was her opinion that they held back when they did only because women were present in the room, and a lot of them were with their wives, but she thought that if she was left alone in that room with only men, she would have been SA'd to the worst degree imaginable. However, women and girls were present. And did anyone stop anything? No. If anything, they encouraged it. Some of the women encouraged certain men to do certain things and pick up certain items, and they found it fascinating. Like, people were going up to her, doing things to her, and they were clearly enjoying bringing her pain. Some had like smiles on their faces. There was one woman who was kind to Marina, and even though she couldn't stop the others, she was there to wipe away Marina's tears. But other than that, she was pushed, pulled, repositioned. Empathy from the audience disappeared entirely. But the most dangerous part came from when someone grabbed and placed a loaded in Marina's hand, and then another person aimed it at her head. A third audience member intervened when it looked like they were about to her, and they removed the weapon. Luckily, it was right then and there that the 6 hours were pretty much up. And Marina moved on her own for the very first time, and she walked towards the audience. And then the people who had harmed her either avoided eye contact, backed away, or left the room completely. It was literally like when she became a human being again, the people of the audience couldn't even face her because they could not face what they had just done to her. The atmosphere in that room for those 6 hours became so aggressive, people were acting like animals. And how sad and scary it is that in this experiment, or performance I should say, how sad is it to see how human beings would act when there are no consequences? In front of others, they had absolutely no problem at all inflicting pain onto another human being. People were laughing at times when they were doing the things that they were doing. It's madness. It really is. Marina has said that Rhythm Zero taught her deeply unsettling truths about people. She saw how it's more likely that people will feel less guilt in a group. Individuals who might never act alone felt some sort of empowerment when other people were watching. And the entire thing showed her that complete vulnerability would cost her her life. Yeah. Sit on that for a second. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on this because I'm so curious but I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
I always sleep with the bedroom door closed at night. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but I always feel more comfortable when the door is closed at night. Now, going back to ancient times, they believed doors not only protected them from humans entering their home, but something negative or evil from coming in. Now, maybe there's something to this. There was a case out in Connecticut. There was this older woman named Ashley. Ashley moves in with a roommate, and it was a small little apartment. She had lived there for about 6 weeks. And she said she was the kind of person that always slept with the door closed at night. But this particular apartment, her bedroom would get really, really warm. And the only way to cool it down was to leave the bedroom door open. So she started sleeping with the doorway open. She said one night she was in bed, and out of the corner of her eye, as she turned in her bed, she looked over at the doorway and she seen someone walk past. And she kind of rubbed her eyes, and once again she seen someone walk past the other way. So the next day she's talking to her roommate and said, were you walking around last night? I kept seeing you walk by the doorway. And he goes, no, I was asleep in bed the whole night. I didn't get up or anything. So next couple of weeks, this keeps happening. She keeps seeing someone walk by her doorway at night. And then one night it happens and her roommate is not there. And she actually calls up her roommate. He comes home. He searches the apartment. They don't find anything. So she said then about a couple weeks after that, once again, she was asleep in her bedroom. And she said she woke up and she just felt very, very cold that night. And when she looked over at her door, which was wide open, she said she noticed the doorway was partially closed. It had moved, which was odd because she knew she left the door all the way swung open. And she said that's when she started to hear this scratching sound. And then the sound of footsteps. Boom, 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 walking down the hallway. She said it got right to her doorway, and she started to hear kind of this weird moaning, groaning, kind of raspy sound. And she said she called out to her roommate, "Hey, is that you? Like, what are you doing?" She didn't hear a response. So she gets up, she goes over to the doorway, and she looks out. There's no one there. This happens like 2 or 3 more times where she hears these footsteps and she could hear like this moaning and groaning sound. So finally she said, you know what, this must just all be in my head. I'm freaking myself out. I'm going to go back to sleep. So she lays down and she falls asleep. But about an hour later, she wakes up, and when she turns over in the bed and she looks at the doorway, she said there was a woman in this big, tall, brimmed black hat. She didn't have a face, and she was wearing some sort of weird black cloth around her. And she said she tried to scream, but she couldn't move, and it felt like something was holding her down. And whatever it was, she could not move at all. She said that's when all of a sudden the hallway light turned on and her roommate come down the hallway to use the bathroom. And whatever this was, it was gone. She could move again. She ran out of the bedroom, runs to her roommate, tells him what happened. And the roommate just kind of gives her this strange look. And he says, you know, about 2 years ago, I had the same exact experience. But it's weird. When I started having this like thing, I started seeing the same thing as you. I would close my door at night and it stopped happening. And so she said that for the period of time that she lived at this apartment, she would sleep with the door closed. So what do you think? Does sleeping at night with the door closed keep us safe? This is really creepy. Now, I was talking to someone in wildlife management, and they were telling me that one of the creepy things that they've been documenting are these large mass disappearances of elk herds across the country. And it's really strange because they are seeing these herds of elk that they've been tracking for years just one night up and vanish without a trace. He said there's, it's not predators. There's no signs of human activity. It's just like something is taking these things. And they have tracking devices. They have these, radio collars that just seem to be disabled. And they cannot figure out what are happening to these elk. Now, one of the strange things they've noted is that right before these disappearances occur, they start seeing these strange lights in the horizon. They are metallic colored, they are quiet, but they seem to hover over the tree line. And not only that, they notice that the animals, the wildlife in the area, start acting scared. They go against their normal patterns and behaviors. Even the fish, start schooling together, will not bite, because it's like they're terrified of something. And the creepiest thing about all of this is the elk themselves. It's like they know that they are about to disappear, like something is about to happen. Because often before these disappearances, they will go out into these open areas. They will huddle together, they will sit down on the ground, and they are peaceful, they are calm, they are not scared. It's like they just are accepting their fate. Now, he said, this is something that's been well documented, but they're really trying to sweep this under the rug. So it hasn't really been talked about much. But we have to wonder, what is happening to all of these elk? Where are they going? What is taking them?
I have thalassophobia. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a deep-seated fear of the sea, and also the fear of what lurks beneath the surface. I've had this fear for as long as I can remember, but one night my friends talked me into going out to sea. And I probably should have just stayed home. My friends are super adventurous and daring. They absolutely love the ocean. One summer night, they decided they wanted to go on a sailing trip. I told them I didn't want to go, but they said, come on, it'll be fun. Eventually, they convinced me. Before I knew it, I was on a sailboat surrounded by nothing but moonlit ocean. At first, me and my friends were having a lot of fun. And then we started getting further and further from the shore, and the water turned black. I started to feel sick, like something was just not right. Then the singing started. It echoed over the water, and then my friends stopped laughing. It was like our joy had just been sucked right out of the air. Something about the song was not right. It almost felt hypnotic. But the song seemed to have more effect on my friend Max than anyone else. We all started talking about what it was, but Max separated himself from the group. And this was very unlike Max because he was always the life of the party. We decided as a group the best thing to do was head back to shore. We were over an hour from the shore, and Max seemed to get more and more distant. Minutes started to pass, and then I saw Max standing at the edge of the boat. We all started to get really worried about him, but we thought, he's probably just anxious, because he wasn't the only one that was freaked out by the song. Then Max jumped. I'm out of time, so go to part 2. I have thalassophobia. Part 2, if you missed part 1, go back and watch that. The last thing I told you is Max jumped into the water. I saw it and I ran to the back of the ship. I dove into the water after him. Thankfully, I managed to grab a hold of his arm. It took everything I had to drag him back to the boat, and he fought against me the entire way back. He started screaming that he wanted to go with her, but none of us saw anyone else in the water. There was still no land in sight, and Max seemed to be going mad. Our adventurous summer night had quickly turned into a nightmare. We had to tie Max down to keep him from jumping again. As we got closer to the shore, the song started to fade away. Max stopped fighting us and eventually fell asleep. We called an ambulance for him as soon as we docked. Nobody died on that trip, but something in Max did. His lively spirit was replaced by a seemingly hollow shell. He was never the same again. From then on, I promised myself I would never step foot on a boat again. Sometimes I still have dreams about it. And that's just one of the many reasons why I
Want to get creeped out? Let's talk about the Vatal or Vatal from Hindu folklore. This is like a demonic vampiric creature that I came across while I was looking up different folklore creatures, and it is literally terrifying. Insert picture. Okay, hello. Scary. Let's talk about how creepy and terrifying this creature is. First of all, Hindu folklore, chef's kiss to that. This creature in its natural form can be invisible or incorporeal, or it can look like a half bat, half man. It is very thin with its skin stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes are said to be flat and never twinkle. It hangs from its toes on a mimosa tree, also known as a Persian silk tree. This creature has no blood in its body, but it also does not drink the blood of its victims. The vampiric nature is more so the way it looks, because rather than drinking the blood of its victims, it actually takes on possession of corpses, causing them to have a horrific appearance that is said to make people freeze in fear or faint. That being said, there is also a benevolent aspect of this creature, because it is known as a deity that protects different parts of India. At first, I was seeing this as a creature called Vatal, which is also correct. But what I was seeing was that this was a creature first mentioned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. However, we now know that this was a misinterpretation, and this creature was not mentioned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It was actually the Yeti. So that's just a little tidbit right there. I absolutely love any creature that is vampiric, whether it be because they look vampiric or because they drain blood or life force. Now, there is a legend associated with this creature, so I will give you the synopsis quickly. According to legend, a holy man asked King Vikram to fetch a corpse from a nearby tree. When Vikram reached the tree, he found that the body had been taken over by a Vatal. On the trip back to see the holy man, the Vatal told the king stories that ended in a riddle. Each time the king answered, the Vatal returned to its tree. After the 25th story, Vikram wisely remained silent. The Vatal rewarded him by revealing that the holy man's quest was really a trick. He planned to kill Vikram once he returned with the Vatal. Since he was forewarned, the king was able to turn the table on the holy man by chopping off his noggin, It doesn't say that, but I feel like TikTok wouldn't like that. The Vatal and King Vikram agreed that the 25 stories told during their journey would be told throughout history. Legend has it that vampires could not threaten people in areas where the stories were told. And then this part's just a little description about the creature. King Vikram could tell that the Vatal had no blood because its skin was cold and clammy like that of a snake. In fact, if the Vatal hadn't been swinging its tail, the king would have thought it really was just a corpse. So creepy. I love it.
I'll start off by giving some background to the story. I used to just live with my mom and my baby brother. My mom got back together with an old boyfriend who has a daughter a year older than me from a previous relationship. My mom and her boyfriend got married, and soon after, we all moved in together. So now it was my mom, my brother, my new stepdad, and my new stepsister. At first, we fell in love with the new house. My sister and I thought the reading nook in the living room was perfect for us to curl up in. We had a big backyard with a beautiful cottonwood tree, and most importantly, our bedrooms were separate from our parents' room. We had a long hallway on the opposite side of the house with 3 doors for each of our bedrooms. My brother had the middle room, while my sister and I had the rooms next to his. My mom preferred it this way since he was still so young and she wanted us to be able to hear him if he needed anything in the night. The first few months of living there were fine. We all got settled in nicely and enjoyed family movie nights together and learned how to be a blended family. I was always a little creeped out by the house. The way the ceiling lights never quite lit up a whole room, and that the sun shining through never touched all the dark spaces. I always felt as if something was watching me. I was adamant on having nightlights in our hallway because I was terrified of the open bathroom door at the end of the hall. Even if I closed the bathroom door before bed, it was always open by the morning. This easily could have been one of my siblings waking up in the middle of the night needing to use the restroom, but we all previously agreed to keeping the door closed at night, since the bathroom was a dark abyss and it scared the 3 of us. After maybe 4 months of living in this house, things started getting weird. One night, I was woken up by my brother crying out in fear. He sounded genuinely terrified. I jumped out of bed and ran into his room to find him curled up in the corner of his toddler bed, with his blanket pulled over his nose, his wide eyes peering at me, filled with tears. I went to him and pulled him into a hug, rubbing his back and asking him what was wrong. "Bad thing in my closet," he cried. I looked over at his small closet, which we usually kept open because his toddler hands hadn't quite mastered opening doors yet, and we wanted him to have access to all of his toys on the floor. I got up and turned on the light, looking into the closet and showing him there was nothing in his closet but clothes and toys. He didn't seem convinced, but I tucked him back into bed, kissed him on his forehead, and went back to my room. The next morning, I came to wake him up for breakfast, and when I asked him about what he saw in his closet, he didn't know what I was talking about. I was confused, but I left it at that. This went on for a few weeks. He would cry, waking me up around 2-3 in the morning almost every night. And every night I would go in, show him the closet didn't have any bad guys, and tuck him back into bed.
True story about a missing persons case that the detectives on the case still can't explain. This was submitted by someone named Kendra, and it involves her older sister Emily. Emily was 3 years old when this took place, and at the time Kendra wasn't actually born, but she did have 3 older sisters, and her mother was a single mother to these 3 little girls. The oldest was 6, her middle sister Emily was 3, and then there was a baby who was 1. She said the baby was just under 1. Anyway, they were living out in the country in a small town, and one night the mom had a friend over, and they were upstairs with the baby, and they were just talking and playing with the baby when the oldest sister, the 6-year-old, comes upstairs, and she says, "Mom, Emily's upset and she wants to talk to you. She wants to be by you." And so the mom says, "Okay, we'll just send her up the stairs, we'll be right here." So the 6-year-old says, "Okay, I'll send her up." So she goes back downstairs to get her, but after a while, the mom and her friend noticed that Emily never came upstairs. Mom found it odd, so she went downstairs to check on the girls, and she only found the older sister playing alone by herself in the room. And she said, "Where's Emily?" And she said, "I thought she came upstairs to talk to you." That's when the mother's panic began setting in. She said she tore up the whole house, looking room to room. She couldn't find Emily. She went to the neighbor's house to ask if they had seen her. Nobody had seen her, and that's when she called the police. When they arrived, the police tore up the entire house. They were pulling out dresser drawers, taking everything out of the closets, looking in cabinets, under the bed, anywhere a 3-year-old could hide, but they found nothing. They were there for hours, and they couldn't find any clues as to where Emily went, and that's when they formed a search party. Neighbors came over with flashlights, and they searched the woods, the roads, fields nearby, calling her name for hours and hours into the night. At one point, the mother was walking with a deputy when she spotted a pair of Emily's shoes in the yard. She bent down to pick them up, but the deputy stopped her and said, "This is now being treated as a missing persons case. Leave them there. Everything is being treated as evidence." 4 hours passed, but there were no other clues or signs as to where she went. And finally, the deputy said, "We can only do one more sweep, but there's nothing else we can do at this point." We walked from upstairs to downstairs in the main living room of the house, and Emily was there asleep on the couch as if she had been there the entire time. No dirt, no scratches, nothing on her feet, as if she had been walking barefoot outside. Doctor said nobody in her family or on the police force was ever able to explain it, but years later they walked into one of the small town diners where they live, and one of the waitresses recognized the mother, and she said, "Are you the missing girl's mom?" Mom confirmed it, and the server said, "I was working the night that your daughter went missing, and I remember the group of deputies and detectives coming in and talking about what had happened after they found your daughter." She's like, "I've never seen a group of men so shaken and disturbed by something that they couldn't explain in my entire life." Andrew says they still can't explain it, and her sister has no recollection of it ever happening. Luckily, that story has a happy ending, but yeah, I'm going to send her the link to this video. Let her know if you have thoughts or questions. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series where I share allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they think nobody else would believe. So if you have a story, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
This kid said his goal was to murder someone before he turned 19 years old. And no one thought to keep an eye on that. No one thought that was weird. Every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer. And today I want to tell you guys about the most notorious serial killer from Montana. And this guy is another serial killer who's absolutely deranged. Before I get into it, if you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far. So today I'm going to be telling you guys about the Missoula Mer. And his name is Wayne Nancy. He was born October 18th of 1955 in Montana. There wasn't a ton on his childhood. It kind of doesn't seem like there's a lot of note. But it's reported that he got in trouble quite a bit as a teenager, often was in trouble with the police and the law, and like got in trouble at school, and it just seemed like he was kind of a delinquent in the area. Some of his childhood friends said that he used to talk about worshiping the devil, and that at one point he even used a metal hanger to brand himself with satanic symbols. So that's alarming. And then on top of that, he kept bragging that he was going to commit his first murder before he turned 19. Again, why is no one concerned about that? So it is believed that he killed his first victim in 1974, just before he would have graduated high school, so before he turned 19. The victim's name was Donna Lorraine Pounds, and she was 39 years old. She worked at a bookstore part-time, and she came home around 3 to find a man holding her husband's rifle, and it's obviously believed to be Wayne. So he's standing there waiting for her in the master bedroom holding her husband's rifle, and he ended up firing a warning shot through the bedroom wall. He put on latex gloves, he grabbed a clothesline, he tied her to the bed, he assaulted her before forcing her to the basement, and he shot her at point blank range. He shot her 5 times before violating her body with the weapon and then leaving the house. And her husband ended up arriving home a few hours later, and he found her body. I can't even imagine like what he was thinking and feeling in that moment. That would have been absolutely horrible. When police investigate and they ask questions and canvass the area and ask the neighbors if they heard anything, 3 different people in the area say that they saw Wayne leaving her house around the time of her death. Plus, we actually know that Wayne had been to their house many times because he was close friends with their teenage son. He had been over so many times, she knew him personally. Their son had actually shown Wayne in a previous time when he had come over where his dad kept the gun. And another witness said that they saw Wayne in the back of their residence. Another person said that they saw him leaving the house headed in the direction of a trailer park where he lived. So it seems pretty likely that he killed her, especially because he literally knew the family and had been to their house multiple times and knew where they kept the father's gun. But the police questioned him, and he said that he didn't go to school that day, but he also did not kill her. He says he stayed home to work on a school project, and obviously he's looking pretty good for her murder. It is pretty likely that he killed her. They just never had enough evidence to actually charge him with murder, so he got away. After this, he joins the US Navy in 1974, and he's in for 3 years before getting discharged for misconduct. He also just had like a lot of really weird, creepy behavior. People were reporting him for harassment, and he just seemed like a creepy guy who was not fit to be in the Navy. But before he was discharged, it is believed that he was using the travel that he was doing for the Navy to assault and kill more people, but we just aren't sure. After he got discharged from the Navy, he went on a trip to Seattle in July of 1978. And during the exact same time that he is there, a 15-year-old named Devonna Louise Nelson went missing. It wasn't until 2 years after that her body was discovered near Missoula, Montana. So she had gone missing in Seattle and showed up in Montana. She was found on a road bank resting against a fence, and she had no shoes or underwear, and her dress was around her neck, and she had been assaulted and stabbed. And at the time that her body was discovered, she actually was a Jane Doe, but eventually they did ID her years later. And Wayne is a suspect of killing her, but again, they've never had enough evidence to completely concretely say if he killed her. In 1984, on December 24th, a 16-year-old named Marcella Sherry Bachman, she went by Marcy, was discovered in a very advanced state of decomposition. Her body had been dug in a shallow grave with just her foot sticking out, and a photographer had stumbled across her body. The police believed that Wayne was her killer, and she had been shot with 3 gunshots to her head. She also had not been identified right away. Initially, she was a Jane Doe, and it wasn't until 2006 that they actually identified her and then realized that she was connected to Wayne in multiple different ways. They learned that her and Wayne were actually friends, and Wayne had taken her in and taken care of her in his home after she had been dropped off by a trucker at a rest area. She actually went by the name Robin at the time, and I'm not really sure why she went by a different name. It doesn't really say, but she went by the name Robin. She got to know his friend. She was around him all the time. It sounds like maybe they were dating even, but it's just, again, not confirmed. We don't know for sure. But then one day, Robin stopped showing up. She stopped showing up around Wayne, and his friends were like, hey, what happened to that Robin girl? And he told some of his friends that he had dropped her at a bus stop, and he told other friends that she had run away with a trucker. The fact that his story is inconsistent as to why this girl went missing is very, very suspicious. She also was buried less than 2 miles from his home, but Marcella's brother, his name was Derek, he had been searching for Marcella since he was 21 years old. He even hired a private investigator after she went missing in 1984. Originally, Derek believed that she might have supported herself as an S worker while she had been away from home, and that is why she was targeted. And he believes that she might have been the victim of Gary Ridgway. On September 11th of 1985, the skeleton of Janet Lee Lucas, who was 23 years old, was found in Missoula, Montana as well. And now multiple bodies have shown up in Missoula, all very similar ages, very similar looking girls, and people are realizing that there is a serial killer in Missoula, and he is dubbed the Missoula Mauler. Janet had been shot twice in the skull, 3 miles from where Marcella's body had been discovered. She also was unidentified for a very long time. It actually wasn't until 2021, so 4 years ago, that they actually identified her. They know that she died sometime between 1983 and 1985, and that she disappeared from Standpoint, Idaho in the summer of 1983. And we don't know exactly when their paths would have crossed. We don't know if he was in Idaho or if she went to Montana, but eventually they did somehow interact with each other because he murdered her and dumped her in Montana. Wayne is the only suspect in her murder, but once again, they do not have enough evidence to concretely say he killed her. However, lack of evidence does not mean lack of guilt. On December 12th of the same year, he killed 2 more people. He murdered 34-year-old Michael Robert Shook and Teresa Lynn Shook. They were a married couple, and he killed them in Montana as well. Wayne had been armed with a gun and walked into their house at 9 p.m. He called himself Conan the Barbarian, which is a fictional character from a book. He said that he wanted their money, and he shot Teresa in the leg. And later, the ME discovered that he had been digging in her leg for the bullet, and likely he did this to try to inflict more pain and torture on her. And after this, he locked Michael in the bedroom. And the reason that they know what he said and what he did is because not only were Michael and Teresa in the home, but their 3 children were there as well, and they saw everything. When he tried to lock Michael in the room, that he also tried to lock the 3 children with him. He shut them in the back room, but Michael tried to fight and escape, and when he did, Wayne hit him in the head and then stabbed him. After killing Michael, he forced Teresa upstairs, tied her up, and assaulted her before stabbing her to death as well. And then he left. But 2 hours later, he decided to return to their home, robbed them of an elk statue, hunting knives, and then a bunch of money. Again, the children are still inside, horrified and traumatized by the fact that this guy just broke in and killed their family. And he tried to set the house on fire with the children inside. So he attempted to murder the 3 children as well. The fire didn't stick, but whatever he was using to start the fire ended up leaking cyanide gas. And it was going to kill the children. Luckily, neighbors noticed what was going on and they were able to rescue the children. All 3 of them did fortunately survive, but the trauma they endured is unimaginable. Police eventually, years later, when they finally figured out that Wayne was the one that did this, they discovered that Wayne had delivered a new couch to Mike and Teresa's house literally days before their murder. A neighbor said that they saw a pickup truck that matched the description of Wayne's vehicle leaving the property around the time of the murders. And by the way, the whole time this is happening, similar to when he was in the Navy, there are tons of reports coming in at his job of harassment. Many different female coworkers from his various jobs throughout the years would say that he was creepy, he was harassing them, he would call them after work at their homes, he would call them like all the time and harass them over the phone. He would take photos of them, and he even was spying on some of them in a peephole that was found at work. But when he was confronted by it, he said that other coworkers showed him the peephole and that he didn't make it, but the coworkers say he showed them the peephole and then they were like concerned about it. So even if he didn't murder all these people, he's a real creepy, pervy dude, but he's also horribly a murderer on top of all of that. On September 3rd of 1986, Wayne also tried to murder another couple named Douglas Wells and Kristen Wells. Wayne had worked at their furniture moving company previously, and Doug actually was at home, it's nighttime, and he looks outside and sees someone in their bushes lurking outside their home. He walks out yelling and discovers that it's Wayne, and he's like, "What are you doing in my backyard? That's so weird." And Wayne says that he was just casually walking by and he thought he saw someone in their yard being creepy, and so he went to investigate because he knew them and was worried if they were okay. Likely story. Unfortunately, this gets Doug to kind of put his guard down, and Doug gives him one and Wayne hits him in the head with it. And this incapacitates Doug. He takes Doug and Kristen and ties them up in the basement. He then stabs Doug in the basement and takes Kristen upstairs to assault her. Doug manages to survive the stabbing and he ends up freeing himself from being tied up. He grabs a rifle that he had been repairing at his house and it only had 1 bullet in it. He grabs it, makes some noise so that Wayne will come away from Kristen and comes back down. This is where they get into a physical altercation. They start fighting and Doug ends up shooting Wayne. It doesn't immediately kill him, but it does incapacitate him long enough for them to get help. Police arrive, they are rushed to the hospital, and fortunately, Doug and Kristen both make a full recovery. However, Wayne ends up dying the next day from his injuries. The police are realizing at the hospital, like, this Wayne guy, like, he just attacked 2 people, and he seems not okay. And they have plans to interrogate him and all this, but he ends up passing, and so they are never able to ask him questions about why he's doing these things, why he attacked Doug and Kristen. They weren't able to ask him anything. They weren't able to interrogate him or ask him about any of the other victims. They start looking into his history and they realize that he's got a long rap sheet of harassing people and being like really creepy, and this is when they start to look at previous murders and they realize he's probably connected to all the murders I just told you about. So they end up going to his house and investigating. They also find in his wallet a huge amount of photos of Chris. Some of them had been taken from bushes while she had been running over multiple different days. So he had literally been following her on the same running route that she took every single day, and he was stalking her. So it's clear that this was premeditated, and he was even scarier than they originally thought. On some of the photos, there was even notes that said, like, "I love you and I want you to live with me." Terrifying. She was being stalked by some creepy guy and she had no idea. So they now are like, oh my god, what have we like stumbled upon? Who is this guy? So they go and search his home, and inside they find evidence that ties him to most of the murders, including evidence that suggests he killed Donna back in 1974, and then they found hairs that they believe to match Marcella, and they find her hair in his truck, and they find photo booth photos of them together. So they have photo evidence that they were together. Not only did friends say that they were together and they were friends, but they have photos of them being all cuddled up together. Obviously, there's a lot unknown about these murders and the murderer because he is dead. But police did realize an obvious pattern that he knew multiple of his victims personally or through his odd jobs, and he was friendly and charming to them. He often got them to let their guard down. He either became friends with them or was in their home seeming like a good worker, and they trusted him to work on their home and repair things or deliver furniture, and so they let their guard down around him, and then he would start to either become friends with them or stalk them, and then he would attack them. He killed at least 6 people, if not more, and he is one of the most notorious killers from Montana.
Weird Spooky Santa Cruz. If you plan on going to Wattle Creek, keep your snacks close, your socks close, and your sanity. Because things go missing at Wattle Creek. Not just lost, stolen. By something that hasn't been alive since 1875. This is William Wattle. Born in 1818, he moved west chasing fortune. He rebuilt lumber mills over and over again because of fires, storms, and natural disasters. The man was stubborn, but so was fate. In October of 1875, Waddle and his friend Bradley went deer hunting in the gulches behind his mill. Waddle's dog caught a scent, something it thought was a mountain lion's kill. But moments later, it wasn't a lion that was charging at them from the ravine. It was a grizzly bear. This is a newspaper article that was published in 1875 accounting the events that happened that day. The newspaper article said that Waddle found himself in a crippled condition and fired his gun as a signal to Bradley. Bradley shouted, "Waddle, did you get him?" And Waddle replied, "No, but he got me." The bear had mangled his thigh. Bradley carried him on horseback. Leaving his arm behind, he buried it, hoping to retrieve it later. He brought him to Dr. Charles Anderson, who was a respected physician here in Santa Cruz. Dr. Anderson said the wounds were serious, but under normal circumstances were survivable. Waddle fought for days, slipping in and out of consciousness. Eventually, infection set in. When they went back for the arm, it was gone, but the earth hadn't been disturbed. No animals, no evidence, just vanished. Waddle is buried at the Santa Cruz Memorial Park, a cemetery already known for its shadows, figures in Victorian clothing, and of course the infamous White Lady of Ocean Street Extension. Stagecoach drivers used to warn passengers to hold their belongings when they passed Waddle Creek, because lurking in the redwoods, reaching out from the brush, was the sticky fingers of William Waddle's arm. Since 1875, hikers, campers, and travelers have reported missing items: food, tools, clothing, always with no explanation. Locals say that the arm never stopped working. It just kept stealing. So if you ever hike near Waddle Creek, zip up your pockets and hold your pack tight. And if something tugs at your clothes or steals your gear, well, maybe you just crossed paths with the restless arm of William Waddle. Let me know in the comments what weird, spooky local stories you want to hear next.
Want to get creeped out? Have you heard about the demon Zozo that haunts Ouija boards? There was a man named Darren Evans, and he liked to experiment with the Ouija board. He was doing this in his 20s. In the early 2000s, he encountered a demon that he believed to be Zozo. Allegedly, the planchette started moving rapidly and spelling out the name Zozo, Z-O-Z-O. Darren didn't recognize the significance of the name, but was freaked out by the aggressive nature in how quickly and aggressively the planchette was moving. He found it to be chaotic and disturbing. Zozo's messages were often cryptic, malevolent, or threatening, leaving Darren feeling very uneasy. After his initial contact, Darren's life took a sinister turn. The paranormal activity in his home started to really ramp up. Objects would be moved on their own, he would hear strange noises, and on top of that, he started to see dark shadow figures in his home. Darren started to experience extreme depression, and those around him that he loved and cared about also started to be affected by some kind of negative force. Those closest to him started experiencing bad luck, illnesses, or unexplained accidents. In fact, one of those accidents was his own daughter, who he left alone in the tub for just a second. When he returned, she was drowning. And when he pulled her out, she told him that Zozo told her to do it. As Darren continued to use the Ouija board, Zozo's messages became even more malevolent, cruel, taunting, manipulative, all of it. Zozo would spell out things like, "I will unalive you, your daughter will, I am the devil, I own you, you can't escape, say goodbye, or hurt them." In one instance, while using the Ouija board, Darren even felt as though he was possessed by Zozo. He felt overwhelming anger and hopelessness. His behavior also changed dramatically during this session, and he felt as though he wasn't entirely in control of his actions. After the session, he had no clear recollection of what had transpired while he was using the planchette, while he was doing Ouija. Darren eventually stopped using the board altogether, but felt psychologically scarred from these incidents.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
It's not Bijou. What the fuck is over there?
I'm reading off the energy of the cats, both the cats. There's energy that moves through this home. There's an energy that moves through this home. And this cat is seeing the energy because the energy is doing this and it's leaving like a tail. So the cat is not like, oh, that's a ghost, that's a spirit, that's an alien. The cat is just seeing this wavy energy and it has like a tail as it exits. And the energy is coming in and it's looking around. And it's odd. They have an ET that's moving through that space. Like quickly, lightly, it's nothing. I mean, it shouldn't be there, but it's not like abducting. It's not anything like that. I'm not going to read any deeper into it because I don't want to be invasive to their home. I don't know where they live and I don't know what town, but I would love to know. Because I'm feeling like an ET, a heavy ET presence. I'm curious if they've had experiences or anyone in that neighborhood because this energy is passing through. And I don't feel as it has anything to do with this family specifically. So this cat isn't like, oh, that's a spirit or that's an ET. The cat is like, woo, what's that wavy energy? Why is it moving? Why does it have a tail? Like it's, like I almost want to use the word like stalking it like it would a toy or a mouse, right? But that's what that cat is seeing, is this like tail of energy and like this wavy, that's the shimmering that the ET does to get in. It shimmers in and it's looking around and then it shimmers out. Ooh.
One of the things I often tell people is do not play with a Ouija board because Ouija boards are essentially a doorway. And when you open that door, anything can come through. It's almost like setting up this beacon up in the air and you are inviting everything to come into your life. Now, I heard this story. There was this young boy named Colton. And Colton and his buddies decided they were going to play with a Ouija board one night. And, they had fun. They didn't know how this pendulum was moving by itself. And, it kind of thrilled them and everything. But they didn't think anything of it. So Colton, he takes the Ouija board and he puts it in his closet. Later that night, when he's sleeping, he starts hearing like a banging sound in his closet. And all of a sudden, when he jumps up out of bed, he looks over at his closet and the door slowly opens. And he gets up and like looks in the closet. There's no one in there. So he's like, that's kind of weird. But he kind of shakes it off, right? The next night, when he's in his bedroom once again, right? He's laying down in his bed, he can't sleep. All of a sudden, he hears this banging sound again coming from the closet. And the closet door opens by itself. The next morning, when he wakes up, he finds the Ouija board is sitting on his bed. So he thinks, you know what? I am done with this Ouija board. Like, I shouldn't have messed with it. I'm done with this. So he takes it out back and he starts a fire. And he starts trying to burn this Ouija board. As he's burning this thing and it's on fire, he hears just disembodied voices. He hears screams. And he thinks, okay, this thing is just ashes now. Everything's fine. Well, it was for a couple weeks, like nothing happened. Until one night, he wakes up and he said he just felt like the air was like very thick. And he had his bedroom door open at the time. Well, all of a sudden, his bedroom door slams shut, and his bed just starts shaking violently. And he said, it felt like there was an earthquake. He jumps out of bed, and stuff on his shelf just starts flying at him across the room. And so he, is running to the door, trying to get the door open, but something like is holding it shut. He starts screaming, for his parents. And when his parents come, the door unlocks. He opens the door. And he tells his parents, what had happened. They don't believe him. So he said, things just kept getting significantly worse. And every night he was just like tormented by something. And he said, about 6-7 months into this happening, right, this thing tormenting him, he goes over to his grandma's house one day. And when he walks into his grandma's house and stuff, he starts talking to her, and he looks over on a shelf. She has a Ouija board on the shelf. And he's like, wait a second, that is the Ouija board that I burned in the fire, the box and everything. And he goes, Grandma, where did you get that? Do you know what that is? And she goes, oh, no, honey, someone left a board game on my front door. And so I brought it in, but I couldn't figure out how to play it. And he said, give me that. And he grabbed it and he takes off running with it, right? So he takes it out into the woods. He buries this thing. And he thinks, okay, maybe this is the end of it. And once again, you know, same thing. Every night, just stuff is happening. Stuff's flying across the room. His bed is shaking, you know. He starts waking up with scratches all over his body. He starts smelling a very foul sulfur smell in his room. And so he goes to a person who is a paranormal investigator and says, you know, what do I do? Like, I ever since I've messed with this Ouija board, something has been following me and like attached to me. And this paranormal investigator said, well, basically, you need to go take this Ouija board and, you know, say that I renounce you. I do not accept you into my life. Like, I am not inviting you. You need to leave. So he goes back out into the woods where he had buried this Ouija board, except it's dug up and it's not there anymore. And so he said, you know, after that, like, it sort of, you know, everything stopped for a little while. It came back, but it was very sporadic. But he said still to this day, like, stuff happens to him from messing with the Ouija board.
I sacrificed my womb for my children's father to get the wealth, the riches that he is enjoying now, only for this ungrateful he-goat to turn around and tell me I'm not his spec. He cannot take me to places because of the level he is now. So he needs to find someone on his level. Story time. So we are not married, but we have got children together. He cried every night when things weren't working for him. I felt extremely sorry for him because this is the guy that I love. This is my children's father, for crying out loud. He would go on his knees every night, begging, pleading, telling me his friends are making it. So if I could sacrifice my womb for him to get the riches, to be where he needs to be, he would marry me. After all, we've got children together. I thought this was huge. I knew the price to pay for this. But then again, I love the guy so much. I thought he needed the help. I couldn't bear see him crying. I couldn't bear see him being in so much pain and his business failing. So I decided to go with him to do the sacrifice, which is using my womb to do money rituals for him. Shortly after, things started looking very good for him. He was buying a lot of houses. He was flipping them, selling them, and making so much money. He opened so many businesses, everything going on well for him. He's traveling abroad every single month because this is how good things were looking for him. But tell me why. He woke me up early in the morning, telling me he needed to talk to me. I was worried. I thought there is something that's happened. So I asked him, and he said he loves me, but the level that he is in now, I am no longer his spec, and therefore he cannot marry me. He knows that he promised me marriage if I help him, but he cannot take me to places he is now, and therefore he needs to marry someone who is in the same spec as him. Can you imagine, after I sacrificed my womb for you, doing money rituals, knowing that the consequences is dear, huge, unimaginable, you are now telling me you cannot marry me because I'm not in your spec. My heart ached. I could not sleep for months. But then I decided to take back what I gave him. I did not tell him. This time I'm paying evil for evil. I decided to go back to the ritualist that we went to. I asked him to reverse it, but he should do it gradually so that he keeps losing all of his wealth. Not at once, but gradually and slowly and painful. He did. Now, he's selling one property here and there. Every week he will sell a property. I am sat there laughing quietly. Yes, you might say this is my children's father, but didn't he think that before doing what he did? He doesn't know that I'm the one behind all of this. He doesn't have good night sleeps, but I'm laughing. I'm waiting until he's got nothing. Then I would leave him. This serves as a lesson to all of you guys out there who think that you are clever. Take this as a warning. I don't care. Call me selfish, call me mean, call me evil. But he is the evil person, and I pay evil for evil. So never ever cross my path, because I will pay you 10 times more what you do to me.
He escaped the death penalty but still ended up dead, and you will not believe who his killer was. Honestly, not a lot shocks me with true crime anymore, but this one did. It was March 1986 in Augusta, Georgia. Alita Bunch was just 16 years old but had a bright future ahead of her. She was not only absolutely beautiful, she was also incredibly smart. She worked as a part-time model and really wanted to become a doctor when she was older. On the 4th of the month, she vanished out of the blue at a shopping centre. And bless her, she'd only popped in really quickly after school that day because she wanted to pick up a birthday present for her mum. So it made no sense why she never came home that night. Witnesses saw her heading back to her car that evening, but then she seemingly vanished into thin air. Police immediately started scouring the area but had no luck. But they did manage to trace her bank cards, which were still being used. So obviously Alita's family were overjoyed. They were like, oh my god, maybe this means that she's still alive. Sadly, it wasn't Alita that was using the cards. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Alexander Williams had mysteriously started driving around in a blue Mustang. Now, this wasn't his car and nobody really knew where he'd found it. He told his mates, oh, I just happened to find it, and also magically in the car happened to be a girl's belongings and bank cards. He very generously offered to buy them a bunch of stuff with these bank cards, and they all went on a shopping spree. He wasn't just being generous out of the goodness of his heart. He wanted a favour. He was like, guys, I know I said that I kind of just found this car, but can you help me dispose of it? So they started getting very suspicious at this point and started quizzing him about where he really got the car. Alexander told his friends that he met a girl in the shopping centre, forced her into her car, and then drove off with her. Now, please guys, I've said this on a recent video, do not ever go to a second location. Chances are, if you're going to a second location, the thing that's going to happen to you there is not going to be good. Make as much noise as possible, as big of a scene as you can, just to get away in front of people. Now, sickeningly, Alexander said that they had S. This wasn't S, by the way, this was R. And he said because she kept making noises, he decided to shoot her. His friends were terrified because Alexander threatened them. He said, I did it once and you damn well better believe I'll do it again. Now, thankfully, the brave witnesses did actually go to the police, and 8 days after she vanished, Alita's body was found. She'd been shot 5 times and had been stripped and arred. Alexander apparently said to his friends that he felt absolutely nothing, no guilt, no remorse about what he'd done to her. And after a 4-day trial in 1986, he was sent to death row. I don't know about you guys, I don't know how I feel about this, but because he was 17 at the time and was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, people were up in arms about him being given the death penalty. They didn't agree that we should be putting a teenager with mental health issues to death. And I mean, this bit does sound wild to me. He was forcibly medicated in prison to ensure that he was sane enough to kill. Everybody was arguing about this case. Some people were like, he's so young, he was abused as a child. Others were like, he's made an adult decision to take somebody else's life in the most disgusting way possible. But in February 2002, his death sentence was removed. It was changed to life without parole, and loads of people felt like this was the right thing. Less than a year later, Alexander was found dead in his prison cell. He'd taken his own life and was found with a shirt around his neck.
Have you ever had a premonition dream where you had this dream that was so vivid and so real that you woke up shaken, and then a few days later, exactly what happened in that dream happened to you in real life? This is exactly what happened to Corey. Corey is a truck driver. He always had the habit of never wearing his seatbelt because he just felt like it was uncomfortable. Especially being a truck driver, you're on the road for a really long time and it was just constantly digging into the side of him. So he just never really cared for it. One night, he has this very vivid dream of him driving down the highway when out of nowhere he loses control and he slams right into a pole. He slams into the pole so hard that his body literally catapults out of the truck into like the sidewalk, and he is unalived immediately. In the dream, he can see himself hovering over his body. He can see cars stopping on the side of the road. He can see people getting out and screaming and yelling and calling for the cops and calling for the paramedics. He can see this whole scene unfolding while his lifeless body is laying on the road. After that, he was so shaken by the dream that he decided that no matter how uncomfortable the seatbelt was, he was gonna wear it no matter what. Just a few days later, Corey is going down the highway doing his regular route when he loses control of the car and slams straight into a pole. The only difference is that since he was wearing his seatbelt, even though like the truck was completely messed up in the front, his body stayed in the car, which saved his life.
So if you ever have one of those dreams where it just feels way too real, I would definitely pay attention to it. Like, a lot of times it's literally your guides and your angels protecting you by putting things in your head to make sure that you're aware and you're living life and you're not making the same mistake.
They became known as the Milk Carton Kids, but they have still never been found. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Patrick Warren and David Spencer. Viewer discretion is advised. This case takes us across the pond to Chelmsley Wood, which is in Birmingham in England. In 1996, Patrick Warren was 11 years old. He was one of 7 kids, and they were from a large Irish family. He loved to play football. He loved noodles, and he loved to make fun of his mom for her thick Irish accent. They would say that, he wasn't an angel. He was a bit on the wild side. But at the end of all of it, he was still a very terrific kid. He was very good friends with 13-year-old David Spencer. David, who loved to box, was described as a really adorable, lovely young lad. But he was also what they would say is very streetwise. He did not like to be disciplined, and he could be aggressive at times. He actually would get in trouble with the law. And I think the takeaway from that is the fact that he just wasn't the type of kid to put up with anyone's shit. Like, you weren't going to bully him. This is basically the neighborhood they lived in. But it was the day after Christmas in 1996, which over there is also Boxing Day. David and Patrick were outside that day playing with their new toys they got for Christmas. Sometime around midnight or so that day, David would go back to his house and say, "Hey Mom, I'm going to be spending the night over at Patrick's brother's house." At this point, it's late, it's obviously dark, and they weren't actually going to the brother's house. They were just still outside roaming and playing. Patrick was on his new bike. He had just gotten this for Christmas. But after about 12:45 in the morning, the boys were never seen again. They would both soon be reported missing, and that's when they got various different accounts from different witnesses who said they saw the boys playing at this time, at that time, and it seemed like the police were adamant to just call them runaways at this point. They did accept the missing persons report, and they were sort of treating it that way, but in their eyes, they had just run away. But both of their moms, their families, knew that that was not the case. One of the biggest issues is that the boys lived in a very working class part of the area. The belief is that because they were more on the lower end class, the police just didn't take this case seriously. Like, it really wasn't featured on the news all over the place. This was not a big story at that point. And what proves that even more is that on New Year's Eve of 1996, so just a few days after the two boys went missing, this young girl here, Nicola Dixon, disappeared. Now, she was from a middle class or upper middle class family, and it was all hands on deck to find her. Her case did go all over the news. She was eventually found murdered in a graveyard, and her story took over everything. Meanwhile, these two young boys, their story seemed to just go away. The girl's murderer was eventually captured and convicted. It doesn't sound like that person had anything to do with these two. Now, not too soon after the boys were reported missing, Patrick's new bicycle was found behind a petrol station. It was just abandoned. There were no signs of foul play with it. And the thought was, if these two boys ran away, why on earth would they get rid of a bike? They could move much faster on a bike. By April, the boys would be some of the first children ever featured on milk cartons there in the UK. This was a practice that was obviously done in the United States, which of course was a pretty successful program, and they were hoping that it would have the same effect over there. But unfortunately, after months of being on milk cartons, nothing ever came from it. But the boys would be nicknamed the Milk Carton Kids. In 2001, a man named Brian Field became a suspect in the case. So in 2001, Brian Field was convicted of a murder. The abduction, rape, and murder of this young boy here, Roy Tuttle. That happened all the way in 1968, but it was DNA evidence that eventually led to Brian Field being the suspect, which then eventually led to his arrest and conviction. According to police in 1996, he was actually already considered a suspect in the disappearance of David and Patrick because he had a long history of criminal acts, especially against young boys. He had been convicted of various sexual offenses against boys. He had kidnapped 2 teenage boys at one point, and the 2 boys managed to escape. He was arrested for that and convicted. In 2006, they interview him with regards to Brian and Patrick's case. He says he has nothing to do with it, and they never had any evidence to charge him. But this wouldn't stop police from eventually searching properties that Brian used to own. And this is in the area of Solihull, which was very close to where the 2 boys were last seen. They do very thorough searches, they dig. This actually includes David Spencer's brother, who is very involved in all of these digs and these searches. He is determined to find his brother. But sadly, it does not lead to anything. Nothing is found. The MO of Brian Field's previous convictions and the attempted rapes and assaults and the murders of young boys in the same age range as David and Patrick, it really does feel like he was likely the person to do this, but they just never had any evidence. Patrick and David, to this very day, have still never been found. They were not runaways. Someone abducted them both and killed them. There's just no other explanation. And if Brian Field was the one to abduct and kill them, and if he is the only one who knows where they are, unfortunately, they will never know. In 2024, at the age of 87, Brian Field died in prison, taking any and all information about David and Patrick, if he was responsible, to his grave. 2 young boys are out there somewhere in the world, very likely buried in some grave in some desolate location, under earth and bushes and fallen branches, alone. And perhaps there is very little hope left that they will ever be located, but there is always still a chance. You never know what other people might know, and it is time to come forward if you do know. Please reach out to the authorities in the area if you have any information. Please help bring Patrick and David home. A shoe impression, some bloody clothes, and a life insurance policy would help capture a killer. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Bill Loe's. Viewer discretion is advised. William Loe, who would go by Bill to everyone, was born on September 20th, 1943. Bill was a part of a big family which consisted of several very successful people. This is a family that did well for themselves. Bill, pictured here with one of his brothers, would eventually become a truck driver. By the time this case occurs, he had been married and divorced 3 times. About a year prior to this case occurring, he had divorced his wife, Wanda. Wanda had a son, his name was Brian Cruz, and Brian would say that Bill was like a father to him. The father he never really had, because Wanda had been married 6 times, including Bill, and most of her husbands were never nice to Brian, but Bill was, because that's the type of person he was. He was a good guy, a caring guy. He took care of people. Bill Loe was an incredibly reliable person. He never missed a day of work. But one day in October of 1990, he didn't show up for work. And then he didn't show up to work the day after that either. That was way out of character for him. So they would contact Bill's family to see, hey, is he okay? What's going on? The family goes to Bill's house. They see his car still parked out front. Nothing outside seems out of the ordinary. But it's when they enter the home and go to the bedroom where things are no longer ordinary. Blood on the walls. There's cast-off blood stains all over the ceiling. And on the bed, underneath all of the sheets, was Bill. He was dead. The coroner would determine that Bill Loe had died from blunt force trauma. This was a very violent attack based on just how blood was everywhere. The blood cast off in several places on the ceiling indicated that this person just kept going and going and going. Bill, despite being married 3 times prior, didn't really have many enemies. He was a well-respected and well-liked guy. But only one of his exes was still a beneficiary to the life insurance. And so that's the first person they go to. His ex-wife, Wanda Knupp, she was the primary beneficiary to $20,000. And when police asked her, she's like, I didn't even know that was even still a thing. I don't know if she collected the money or not, though. But when they looked into her alibi, they were able to verify with 100% certainty that she was nowhere near Bill's house when this murder would have happened. That being said, was it someone close to her? There was a secondary beneficiary on that life insurance policy. Someone who was really close to Bill. Brian Cruz, his former stepson. When they finally track Brian down and they talk to him, he ends up coming forward to say that, well, he claims that Bill had been physically abusive to both him and his mother, Wanda. When Bill's family found out about this, they were like, what? That just wasn't a possibility. They have never known Bill to be abusive, to lay hand on anyone. It's not saying that it's impossible. Obviously, it could be. You may never know what's really going on, behind walls of someone else's home. It didn't sit right with people. And they wanted to find out, Brian, where were you? Well, he too apparently had an airtight alibi. His alibi was named Mike Hale. And at first, they believed Mike Hale's story. Okay, there's no way Brian could have done this. They were together, they weren't near the house. But then they found out that Mike Hale had a criminal history himself, and he was known to be a bit of a liar. Police bring him back in because they weren't believing this alibi story. And suddenly, Mike Hale flips. He says to police, Brian did kill Bill Cruz. Brian allegedly told Mike, quote, Bill Loe's will never bother my mother ever again. He said that he and Brian were together that night. They had gone to Bill's house. Mike Hale waits outside. Brian goes in. He comes back a short time later, and he has blood on him, and he's carrying an axe handle, and he throws the axe handle onto a roof. Police are able to find that exact roof, and they collect the axe handle. They also collect Mike Hale's clothing from the night of this all happening, and they collect Brian Cruz's clothing. Mike Hale's clothing has not one single drop of blood. Brian's, however, has blood. Whose blood? Bill's. Also damning was outside of Bill's house, they found a shoe impression right outside of Bill's bedroom window. This exact shoe impression. Now, it had rained like a night or two prior. So if the shoe impression was there before the rain, this would have filled up with water and eventually sort of just went away. So this would tell them that the shoe impression was left after it rained. Well, Brian says, well, I was there a couple of days prior, actually, because I went in there to get some of my mom's belongings. Okay, but why is his blood on your clothes? Ooh. Oops, can't really answer that. Brian tried to say that Bill was this really good guy, but then eventually he said that Bill was this abusive guy, and I'm now getting back at him. Also, there's money involved, Tale as old as time. But Brian kept denying he had anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, he now is saying that Mike Hale did it. Mike Hale, the guy that did not know Bill, never met the guy, had zero motives to kill the guy, especially not to whack him to death as he's asleep in his bed. Nothing was stolen. What does he have to get out of this? Nothing. But Brian gets to kill someone he says was abusive, and also money. I don't know if the money was ever actually paid to them or not. At any rate, Brian Cruz was now arrested, and he's now being charged with the murder. Mike Hale was eventually charged with, withholding information from police. He served about 1 month in jail. Brian Cruz, this is him pictured at a much later time, goes on trial, and with all the evidence, the shoe impression, the blood on his clothing, the potential motive with the life insurance policy. By the way, the shoe impression matched one of his shoes that he owned. Forgot to say that. But the jury came back with a verdict of guilty. In June of 1991, he would be sentenced to life in prison without parole, where he still denies having anything to do with the murder. Unfortunately for him, the evidence says otherwise. And Bill got the justice he very rightfully deserved.
Have you ever heard the story of the boy who came back and solved his own murder? He was born along the border between Syria and Palestine, and from the moment his mother first laid eyes on him, she was struck by something unusual, a long red birthmark running across his face. Around the age of 3, the boy began making shocking claims. He insisted that in a past life he had been murdered. A doctor named Eli Lash, along with a German therapist, began following the boy closely as part of their research into reincarnation. reincarnation. During their evaluations, the boy shared disturbing memories, saying he recalled being struck and killed with an axe. So under the supervision of this doctor and therapist, the boy led them, along with a town elder, to a location where he believed his previous body was buried. When they arrived, he appeared to recognize the village despite never having been there before. He also recalled his previous name. When they asked the locals if they knew a man by that name, they were told that that man had been missing for 4 years. The boy then guided them to the exact spot where he believed his body lay buried. And sure enough, after digging for hours, they uncovered a skeleton. The skull showed an obvious blow to the head, matching perfectly with the bright red birthmark the boy had been born with. Lying beside the remains was the suspected murder weapon, an axe. The boy was even able to name his killer, who initially denied everything, but when confronted with the evidence, he eventually confessed. And according to the perpetrator, the two men had been neighbors, and the killing happened after a heated argument over land.